everyone. Welcome to the Revolver Fan First podcast. I'm your host, Christina Rowett, and with me today is Johnny Three Tears of Hollywood Undead. How are you today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm great. Let's do this.
Let's
So,
go.
first question, who was the first artist you put on a pedestal?
Oh, first artist I put on. Probably, I mean, it was a group of artists, but probably Wu-Tang was the first time I was like obsessed with another group or
Yeah.
an artist in general. Um, I used to wear all the Wu wear, the W, and I wanted to get it tattooed on me. So that was probably the first time where I was like groupieville, like obsessive.
How did you find Wu-Tang?
Well, it's funny because obviously they're a New York based band and I grew up in LA, but a lot of my buddies at this point they were still kind of underground in LA, but then when 36 Chambers came out, they kind of just blew up. So everybody, they were never like a radio band, but everybody who listened to hip hop knew who Wu-Tang were, and they kind of, I mean, they broke a lot of molds, more than one. So I had never heard anything like it growing up on West Coast hip hop, and I had never heard any with the interplay between the rappers, and then the production was like next level. So it was one of those things. It was more of a word of mouth thing, but once I heard them, that was it for me.
Who are your three favorite artists that just don't give a fuck? Yeah.
There like Eminem comes to mind, of course, because he
Dude.
was like saying fuck his own label while he was on the label.
Yeah.
And he like broke every rule that you can imagine. There's also a big part of it that a lot of guys act like they don't give a fuck, but they do, but not giving a fuck is part of the persona.
Yeah.
But there's people I won't mention because I'm not supposed to, that I know for a fact walked away from millions of dollars because, 9 Inch Nails is a great example. There's a lot of Linkin Park stood up to Warner Brothers. There's definitely bands out there that, left stuff on the table to stick to what they wanted to do. It's just very few and far between. 9 Inch Nails is a huge inspiration for me personally and a few of us. And then, of course, Linkin Park was like one of these groundbreaking bands where, using electronic, they took what Ministry and 9 Inch Nails had done and like popified it. And it was kind of like, like catchy synth stuff. And they definitely did some stuff that I'd never heard before. And I'm a huge fan of Linkin Park.
What are 5 songs that changed your life?
Ooh, Old Man by Neil Young, Eleanor Rigby by the Beatles, Coming Undone by Korn. That's kind of out of left field, but I love that low end. That was one of those things where I was like, dude, this thing's a monster.
Korn were huge, man. Korn changed things. We've had them
Korn, yeah,
lately. Yeah,
they're still around, so they haven't gotten the credit they deserve yet. But that's a band that should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Those guys have put out quality music for so long. They're so original. They deserve everything that they get in the end. I would say the song Soldier by Eminem. It was like one of it just goes like 3 straight verses of nonstop, like how the fuck does he do that type stuff. And then Wu-Tang, I would say Cream, because that was that song that made me I love that whole album. I have both their albums, but Cream would probably be the other one by Wu-Tang Clan. Yeah. And there's so many, so that's just trying to narrow it down quickly.
Yeah. Can you tell me about the winged creatures you have on you? You have a lot of winged creatures.
Oh, butterflies. Yeah, I got a lot of butterflies on me. Yeah.
What's that about?
It actually there's an author. He's British. His name's John Milton. He wrote a book, it's more than a book. It's a very long poem called Paradise Lost. And I was obsessed with him for a long time. It's he's one of my favorites. And he talked about butterflies being, he called them creatures of the brief season, and there's a metaphysical approach to the way he looked at it. You're a caterpillar, you're a butterfly, and how beautiful they are, but how life is so brief that it almost hurts. His whole take on it, I don't want to paraphrase him too much, but it just stuck with me, what his notion of what butterflies were, and I always kind of responded to it emotionally. So when I was young, I started getting butterflies, and then I just kind of never stopped.
Your musical Mount Rushmore. You've got 4 faces to carve into the stone. Who are they?
John Fogerty from Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Really?
Yeah, he's my favorite songwriter. Tom Petty.
Wow. That's interesting, man.
Eric Clapton.
You're getting very
And
70s. You're getting very 70s kind of ultimate
well,
70s.
60s, 70s. I mean,
Yeah.
those guys are like what they're the beginning. They were the impetus of everything that has come after. And then I'm going to put two people, John and Paul, because they were the principal writers. Even though I like George Harrison's stuff just as much, he just didn't have as much output. But those four would probably be the guys that are like the quintessential songwriters. They wrote simple songs that were big and huge and beautiful, and they like fabricated the structure that everybody built everything off of since.
What would you be doing right now 20 years ago?
I was just a young criminal,
Yeah.
really. It's funny because I had a felony when I was young. So music, it's funny, it worked out in my favor. I was like, man, I'm fucked because I wanted to join the military. They wouldn't let me in. And then most places won't hire you. So it really made music kind of my only option. So it
Yeah.
kind of drove me into taking that on. And if I hadn't been in trouble when I was young, who knows what I would have done? Maybe I wouldn't have taken music as seriously because I would have had other, avenues. So if I was just causing trouble, being a shithead. And then the band worked out. So I got very lucky in that sense, because outside of that, maybe just a life of crime.
Hotel California, you're referencing, one of the greatest songs, you know. Can you tell us a bit about the connection with that? Like what made you do it? And yeah.
Well, I mean, the song, I mean, the record, we were trying to, explore kind of the dichotomy of that California is, because it's like a third world country there now, where you have like the elites and tons of money, and then you have all the people who kind of serve them, the middle class, and pretty much everybody's like taken off. And it's fascinating because you could be at like, a Louis Vuitton store in Bel Air and drive a few blocks and there's a bread line, a homeless shelter. So you have a society that's very centered around the haves and the have-nots, and we've always been interested in that dichotomy of growing up there and seeing people move there. A lot of people, they look at the tech industry in Hollywood and they have a very vivid idea of what it is that in reality it's not. And I've seen so many people go out there thinking they're gonna accomplish their dreams and get chewed up and spit out. And so we when we took the idea of Hotel California, obviously we used a K. We were trying to paint it in a different light than what the terminology would you would presuppose, I guess.
Yeah.
And it was just cool. And we love the Eagles, and it's that really is a great track. So we were, it's a respect thing, not an insult by any stretch.
What are some songs that are really cut through with the fans that people kind of get in touch with you and they're like, wow, this really spoke to me on a huge level?
And we have a few, like a Bullet is a big one. Off our second record. We have one called Something to Believe off the Psalms EP that I hear a lot about. This is where, kids have the lyrics tattooed. There's a song called Gotta Let Go that I hear a lot about. Paradise Lost. There's some of those that really, you have that emotional connection to.
Yeah.
Those are some of the ones I hear most often. Where you've transcended a certain level with people. And honestly, it's cool because that's really, it doesn't happen often, but that's really what it's all about. If if someone's, hey, you got me through this or you got me through that, because I know I have those artists and those songs, and to be able to do that for somebody else, I don't think it gets any better than that.
Yeah. Who was the first artist you saw yourself in?
That I saw myself being?
Yeah, that you saw yourself in, like different to putting on a pedestal, but like this person's kind of speaking to me in a certain way.
Man, probably Jeff Buckley was the first.
Really?
He had passed away by the time I really started listening to him. But yeah, him and Elliott Smith are the two guys where I would say emotionally I responded to strongest, where that my pain was their pain kind of feeling, and they knew what I was going through, or I could relate in that sense. Those are probably the two dudes who spoke to my soul, so to speak.
Yeah. Who do you okay, yeah, that's a question. Who do you turn it to in times of sorrow? What's your music? Yeah.
Oh man, there's a bunch. I really, I'm gonna be honest with you. When I get in that mode, I try not to get into music because it makes it worse. Mostly, it doesn't make me feel better. So I'll usually try and listen to something to snap me out of that moment. But you know, one record that certainly has gotten me through some of those moments is Beck. Most people think of Beck as kind of an alternative. He does a lot of interesting stuff, but he had an album called Sea Change or Sea Changes in 2002. He had just gone through a breakup with a girl, and he wrote the record in 2 weeks with the Radiohead producer, and it was just phenomenal because it was like so raw and there's so much pain in it. And most of his music was a little more eccentric than that, but that was one album that when I was going through some painful moments, that certainly helped me get through them, or made it worse in certain ways because you kind of, you know, wallow in your own self-pity. But I remember, you know, going through hardships and getting drunk and just listening to that record on repeat for a week. And that was definitely up there.
What was the soundtrack to you falling in love the first time?
You know what? When I first fell in love, I was way into punk. So like the Fat Records bands like Lagwagon.
We haven't even covered this. Let's cover the punk phase. We haven't even gotten into this. How does this fit into the picture?
Yeah, well, so like 16-ish or something like that.
Yeah.
I really got in, to like Millencolin and Good Riddance and Lagwagon, No Effects, and all the Fat Records bands, all the Nitro bands. AFI is what took me on a darker turn, you know, when Black Sails came out. So when I started, like, the first girl I ever like loved or thought I loved, I don't know what the fuck it was.
Yeah, who the hell knows, man?
Yeah. But she had spiky hair, and we go see, there's a place called the Palace in Hollywood. It's now called the Avalon, but that's where all the punk bands played. So, you know, we go to the shows together, and, you know, we were like, you know, in love, I guess, on that, wearing Dickies and spiked belts, and you know, the whole
wallet chain,
thing,
the wallet chain, and the socks pulled up, the
whole thing. And that was back when like 140 ounce could get me drunk. So we'd pull up in the car, we drink like a 40 of Mickey's, and I'd be tanked for the whole show. And, you know, it was a different time. It was simple. Life was simple back then. So punk was certainly like the anthemic aspect of when I first started feeling things like that. And then I found AFI and stuff like that. And that kind of twisted me into more of a darker path, I guess.
Yeah. That's an interesting gateway drug.
Yeah. Well, when because AFI was, you know, to answer that and stay fashionable, their early records were very, you know, pretty straight up pop punk to a degree. And then they slowly started shifting down that road. And then, you know, from that, you know, screamo and those things started, you know, I was never into that kind of stuff so much.
Yeah.
But those AFI records, when they started going goth, as you put it, that was pretty like, whoa, dude, punk rock it's not just fun or jokey or hokey. Yeah. It was like, you know, that was hardcore. So that was definitely a big influence. But yeah, the soundtrack of that time of my life was certainly the pop punk stuff and punk rock in general.
Yeah. What is your take on drugs and how that fits into music? Are you against or for, or like what? Yeah. Oh, that's quite a personal question, me, but I'm interested in how people feel about it, because it is kind of a part of the world. Yeah.
I have a very messy history with drugs. I actually am in recovery and stuff.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. But I was a drug addict for, I don't know, 12, 13 years. And when I talk about drugs, it's always in the sense of the negative aspects of it. I certainly don't glorify them.
Certainly not. Yeah.
So when I talk about drugs, it's more of a warning, I suppose, like, especially because you're in the position of an opinion leader, and you have young people in particular who look up to you. So I would never want to glorify those things. But at the same time, I certainly don't think it would serve anyone to hide them. Yeah. So when I talk about drugs and as far as subject matter and music goes, it's usually because it breeds a lot of creation, but it's a dark experience as well. Our first 5 records I wrote when I was blown out of my wits. So it certainly is part of it. It's part of it, whether you like it or not. And this has been going on forever, you know, from the Beatles to the Beach Boys, all the way up. You know, obviously marijuana is probably the most common creative drug, but that was never my jam in that sense. So we certainly include it in our music, but it's never to glorify it. It's typically, I would say, more of a warning that, hey, if you really think you want to be like me, well, it's not the right path to go down, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, it's really good to, you know, have that clarity of mind in this moment in your life, sort of thing. you
Yeah.
know?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I know a lot of dudes who unfortunately never made it out of it, and they're
Yeah.
dead. So,
Yeah.
if that isn't a warning enough for you that where these things typically end up,
Yeah.
it's unfortunate because you can't, no matter how much you talk about it, some people just don't learn. But I had enough friends pass away
Yeah.
from those circumstances that was enough for me. And then of course, you have kids. I had kids, and I was still being a fucking moron. But eventually, I was like, well, dude, do I want to be a parent, or do I want to just be dead by the time they're 10 years old? So you're
Yeah.
left with those choices, and I fortunately was able to make the right decision.
Yeah, and you made a cool person. I mean, she likes Deftones. That's sick.
Yeah, she loves the Deftones.
You've done some good parenting there, man. Like you know what's up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully she doesn't ask me what white pony means, because I know exactly what you're talking about.
You gotta like balance it out. Well,
I know.
what's next for you guys? Just playing and
Well, we're touring. We got the
out?
tour going. We got the record coming out on August 12th. Um, we got some cool collabs we're working on right now with some artists that we're really excited about that we're going to put out next year or later this year. Yeah. So we got some really cool stuff. We got way into collabing during COVID because there was nothing else to do, and we realized how much we like doing it. So we'll work on some of that stuff and then finish off this tour, put out the record, and kind of go from there, see what happens.